This month was a bunch of very increasingly bizarre and kind of unhinged books. And yeah, my reading experience is all over the place, and some of them were very weird. So if you're new here, hello, my name is Steph, and if you haven't already figured it out, I talk about books and reading and writing. This is my April wrap-up. So the very first book that I read in April was Conversations with Friends. This is my first Sally Rooney book, and I don't know how I felt about it. I listened to this on audio, so I really liked the narrator. I thought she did a really lovely job. So Conversations with Friends follows Frances and her friend Bobby as they become friends with this couple. Things kind of get weird. There's like really bad boundaries between everybody, and look, I didn't like it very much. I just don't think that Sally Rooney is really for me, but I've also heard that people who like Sally Rooney's other books don't like this one. Frances was a very dissociated character. Like the way that she is written with like very flat affect, and even Frances herself says she doesn't feel anything, but then something will happen, she'll be like, oh, I feel nothing, but then she'll behave in a totally crazy and erratic way where it's like, I think you felt something. So it creates this like weird sense of dissonance between what she's telling you and how she's behaving, which normally I would really like. But there's another thing where she will often not tell you what someone is saying directly to her, like in quotations. She will just kind of summarize the gist of it and be like, oh, such and such said something like that to me. I think reading this book, it just felt very gossipy. So it was very easy to read. It went down kind of smooth. It's like watching a reality TV show where you're watching a person who is not necessarily likable and they're just making these horrible life decisions, and you're hearing all of their like internal dialogue and monologuing. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to kind of punch Nick, the man in the couple, and I thought they all kind of deserved each other. So Conversations with Friends. That's kind of all I gotta say about it. The next book that I have to talk about is another one that I'm in the middle of the road. I liked it more than Conversations with Friends. I got this on NetGalley, so thank you very much to the publisher and the author in NetGalley for providing this book to me for my honest review. It comes out on May 1st, and it is called Artificial Wisdom. So there are things about this book that I actually found very intriguing. It's set in 2050, and there's a lot of natural disasters, including a big heat wave that killed our main guy's wife in the Persian Gulf. Our main guy is named Marcus. He is a reporter, and he is, obviously emotionally very motivated to discover what the truth behind this is, because he has gotten some information from a whistleblower that makes it seem like this heat wave might have actually been intentionally like controlled and manipulated by a government or a group of people in order to commit genocide. So he gets pulled into this very dangerous investigation, and all the while the world is kind of electing a global dictator. One of them is an AI bot in order to solve the issue of climate change, because it is a huge threat to humanity's survival. There's just a lot of things that are going on. I hope you can't hear the leaf blower behind me. It's autumn in Australia. This kind of reads like a Jack Ryan TV show feels. Like it's very fast paced. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of drama. You get thrown straight in and you have to kind of get yourself on board or die in the heat wave, I guess. The writing style was very easy to kind of read and blow through. It's not very flowery. Because I kind of prefer a more elaborate writing style, I felt like there was occasionally a bit of a blank room syndrome. Like I didn't really know where these conversations were happening or like what the environment was supposed to feel like. And I felt like the information got a little bit bogged down because there's just so much going on. But it was a really cool read. It was a really cool angle, seeing how he brought AI into it, and then with all of these politics. So if you're looking for a kind of sci-fi dystopian feeling sort of novel that explores things like ethics and corruption and AI, this is possibly a good one for you to check out. The next book that I read was part of Christiane Jones's book club, and that is Parable of the Sower. I have only ever read Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. This is something that's been on my to read list for absolutely ridiculous and obscene amount of time. Parable of the Sower is also a dystopian novel. In it, we follow a woman named Lauren who's living in a gated community in the United States. And so for most of her younger life, she has been largely protected from some of the gangs, the addicts, the poverty, and all of the suffering that tends to come along with a crumbling government and dying world. But she's not fully protected because she is something that people refer to as a sharer, where she is experiencing sort of a supernatural level of empathy. So if she sees somebody get cut or something, she will feel the pain, and sometimes she will even bleed. And through this story, she begins to travel north with the intention of starting her own religion and finding some semblance of stability and peace. The religion is called Earthseed, and she'll have these kind of parables that she is writing, and she finds people along the way that she develops relationships with and brings along with her and is slowly creating her cult. This book was way darker than I expected it to be, and it was very focused on confronting the grim reality of her experiences. She is so matter-of-fact about some of the things that she sees. Yeah, it was interesting. And I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I read it. I think it's a book that I'm going to think about a lot. The way that Octavia Butler writes, she really, I feel, makes you think about inequality and power. But something I am kind of curious about is that in Fledgling, there was a very big age gap relationship, and she played with that a lot. And there was something kind of similar to that here as well. Okay, so Lauren, she's 18. She begins a romantic relationship. He's 57, which that's pushing it for me. I don't know. I get it because of the situation that they're in and the everything. But I find that interesting, and I'd be very curious to know if that is a theme that we see in a number of her books. I have to read more of her books to know, I guess. But the way I would summarize this book, if I had to do it in one sentence, is girl starts cult and shacks up with a rich guy to fund her cult. That is what this book is. I mean, there's a lot more depth to it as well, but that's what happens in this book. The next book that I read is a nonfiction. This one is one that I just picked up from the library. I don't have it with me anymore, but it's called Letters from Angela Carter. And this is written by her, I believe it was an editor or something, that had a lifelong friendship with Angela Carter, and she would send her postcards. And so it was kind of her friend reflecting on Angela as a woman and a writer. And it kind of felt like an extended funeral speech. It had a lot of really great anecdotes about her, and it was just obviously written by a friend who loves her. Angela is framed as an eccentric. Probably put that together already if you've read any of her books. Her editor kind of describes her as a bit harebrained and confident in her eccentricity. I just kind of felt a little bit in the middle of the road about this one because I enjoyed, there's so many sounds going on outside my window today. There's a plane, if you can hear it. That's all. But yeah, there's a lot of little anecdotes, but there's not a whole lot of context to who Angela Carter really was and her life, and even context to where she was when she was writing. There's a section where she's she was in Japan. I got this postcard from her in Japan. This is how her weight fluctuated. I guess I would love a little bit more biographical information, but it was just something that I picked up because I saw it. It was very brief, 150 pages or something like that, and something to pass the time. So a letter from Angela Carter. The next one I want to talk about is Warm Hands of Ghosts. This book I was very excited to discover actually centers Canadians during World War I. It begins in Halifax right after the Halifax explosion. If you don't know, it's when two ships went boom, and it killed a lot of people because it blew the glass out. And in this explosion, our main character, Laura, loses her two parents. She was a nurse during World War I. The war is still ongoing, but she was sent home because she has kind of this lingering injury. Because her parents are dead, she is all alone except for her brother, who is currently on the front lines. Then the military sends her a package of his clothes, both of his dog tags, and a note saying that he's missing. Now, this feels wrong and upsetting to her because how can he be missing if they have both of his dog tags? If he was dead, he's supposed to get buried with one dog tag, and the family is supposed to get the other one. So she figures he must be alive, but what on earth could have possibly happened to him, and where is he? So she decides to go overseas and basically look for him. I felt very conflicted about this. we have two perspectives. So there was Laura, the war nurse, and then there was her brother. Particularly from Laura's perspective, I felt that it was quite slower paced, but the historical aspects I just thought were done incredibly well. Was more historical leaning than fantasy leaning, although there is this one sort of character, the fiddler, who I loved his character. I found him by far to be the most interesting person in this book and the most mysterious. Like, she never fully explains his magic. You have to use your brain a little bit to figure out what is the symbolism. Is there symbolism? Is this, what's going on? I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it because I think that there were way too many side characters. I really did not care about them because Laura doesn't just go overseas with herself. She brings like one or two other people with her, and I found them irritating. I didn't really like them. I thought there was some really beautiful writing and moments in this book. I wish it was a little bit more Canadian. Like, I kind of feel like, yeah, Canadians do have a bit of a unique culture. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more Canadian stuff in it. You know, it kind of just felt like, I'm an American that lived in Halifax. I would have had extra appreciation as a Canadian for that if there was more Canadianism. Okay, after that, I read A Fate Inked in Blood. I have seen quite a few reviews of this book that are kind of middle of the road or very meh. I feel like this story just hit me at the right time. I was ready for it. I wanted it. I needed it. I loved it. This is a Viking-inspired romantasy. We follow Freya, who has to marry an old guy who's also like the chief. What do they call them? The chief. We're gonna call him the chief. But the thing is, this old guy, he's got a really hot son, so call me a pervert, but that's a great setup for some drama. Freya is awesome. I love her as a character. Bjorn, the hot son, obviously the love interest. Okay, he's one of those guys where he does have some depth to him, but you don't really see it until you're at the like 7/8 of the book mark. And so for most of the book, his main personality trait is his muscles and his prowess with women. That's my main criticism of this book, honestly, is, you know, it gets old really quickly, and I've read that a lot. I'm kind of over it. What I did love about this was the magic. She has a drop of the god's blood. She is able to call down the power of this shield maiden, shield god, when and where she needs it, which obviously makes her very valuable. So these few people who have magic, it's so cool. Like, everybody has a different one, and it's like just very clear. I loved it. And then there's another kind of magic, which is kind of like runic based, and that was really interesting too. I just thought this was such a fun read for me. It hit me at the right time, and I just needed it, and it was such a good book. I really enjoyed it. Fate Inked in Blood. Next, I want to talk to you. I loved it. I devoured it. I got very much like Gollum and the Genie vibes from this book. It's historical. So we follow Lucia. She lives in Spain during Spanish Inquisition, and she has magic of like small miracles. It's all coming from like little proverbs where she's able to unburn bread or to duplicate things in small. This catches the attention of some very important, powerful people, including one guy who might be immortal and is, you know, shadow daddy, and that takes her for a bit of a trip. There are aspects about this book that I absolutely loved. It felt incredibly different from anything else that she has written. There could have been more character development. Get a lot of different perspectives and a lot of relational stuff, like relationship development, particularly between Lucia and her love interest, Santangel, or pronunciations, getting me again. That is happening off page. So you kind of get a bit of banter, and then we kind of switch gears and it's the next day and we're doing things again. I feel like that is actually kind of important, and we didn't get as much of that because, and Leigh has even said this on like her Instagram, that a lot of her emphasis and focus and passion in this book was towards developing and exploring her family history, the experience of Jewish and Muslim people being targeted by the Spanish Inquisition during the 14, 15, whatever hundreds. That, I would say, is what made it great. The parables that she drew on are real. They're from Ladino language and Ladino culture. The way she integrated the history in this was incredibly well done. I definitely feel like Deb Harkness was the right person to blurb this book. I really enjoyed it. Not my favorite by Leigh Bardugo. but I enjoyed it quite a bit. Another book that I read this month was We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is a reread, and I love this book. I haven't read it for 10 years. We follow Meerkat. She spends a lot of time thinking murderous thoughts, kind of like Wednesday Addams, not quite so on the nose. Mostly focusing on, like, these are poisonous mushrooms, you know. It's a very claustrophobic, beautifully written, slightly flowery, creepy little novella. As I said, we follow Meerkat. She's the weird, creepy girl. She lives in this old manor house with her sister and her uncle after the rest of her family was poisoned and all died. That's all I'm gonna really tell you about this book, except that I love it, and I think that there's very few books that I would say is a perfect book. This is one of them. It's kind of like that meme or that reel that you might have seen around where it's like, oh, I just want to become the witch in the woods that children tell like scary stories about and like slowly becomes myth. It's this book. This is the book for you. I want to talk about White Cat, Black Dog. This is my first book by Kelly Link. I've heard about her a lot. I've always wanted to try reading some of her stuff, but she mostly writes short stories. Those are not typically for me. But I do like fairy tale retellings, and that is what this is. They are magical realism, and some of them are quite close to the original story, and some of them like have almost no resemblance. There's a huge, huge range. I would say that all of them kind of feel like a fever dream, or like you've played a game of like Telephone, or that story where like somebody will come up with a line, then another person will come up with another line and keep building the story, but also making it crazier and crazier. That's what my experience of her stories were like. My favorites were The Girl Who Did Not Know Fear. That's a retelling of The Boy Who Didn't Know Fear. And The White Cat's Divorce, which is a retelling of The White Cat. Yeah, they were just very whimsical, very fun. I could see if you like Angela Carter's fairy tales, you might like these. They're not quite as like sexual or bloody, although they're by no means like prudish. I had a very good fun time with reading them. White Cat, Black Dog. And then my month hit its peak of bizarre, crazy, weird ass, like really strange reading experiences with the Pisces. This is my first book by Melissa Broder, and it is not totally what I thought it was going to be. I went into it expecting that it was going to be like Mrs. Caliban, which I absolutely loved, and it was not quite. Like, it sort of is in the way that it's a woman having a relationship with an amphibious creature man, and it's supposed to be a critique of society and exploration of like her experience, but I don't think that it was quite as successful as Mrs. Caliban was at doing it. Okay, so we're following a woman who's in her late 30s. She's starting to want children, but now she kind of might want children because she's upset about losing the option. She has a problem with looking for validation from other people, particularly from men, and this is really a problem that's brought to the fore when she goes through a breakup and goes to stay with her sister because she is not coping well, and eventually develops a relationship with a strange swimmer who never fully emerges his bottom half from the water. He's a merman, kind of, essentially. Except he's a merman from like below his equipment down. Yeah, we don't get into fish genitals in this book, which is one thing I'm kind of grateful for, because this is quite a raunchy, grotesque book. The main character is sort of unlikable and negative, but I also kind of liked her. Yeah, it was weird. I think there was more smut than there needed to be, and I don't necessarily think that there was smut necessarily to be erotic, but I think she was making a point in using these interactions that she was having with other men and with this merman to like explore our main character a little bit, but it just got to be like too much, and I think the theme got lost at some point. Maybe not. Maybe it was just not my taste. The last half is like them going at it. What I found weird and like kind of funny, and will give you probably an idea of like what you're getting into with this book, is when she was with the merman, they would be doing it, and she would be thinking about eating his fishtail with garlic and butter sauce, like more than one time. And I was thinking, what the? Very strange. I will also say, because the one thing that I am like sensitive to reading about is animal cruelty. There is some in this that has nothing to do with fish that I found really hard to read about, and I just didn't And I don't know if it was actually necessary for the plot. Yeah, I'm in the middle of the road about this one. There were aspects I really enjoyed. There were others that I was just kind of like, might just not be for me. The next book that I want to talk about is After Hours on Milagro Street. We follow Alex and Jeremiah. Jeremiah is currently a tenant over the bar that her grandmother owns. Alex is coming back home for the first time in many years because she has a lot of baggage in this town that she used to come from in like Kentucky or something. And she's wanting to take over the bar and renovate it and kind of make a name for herself because she's known as the baddest bitch in bartending or something like that. The book kind of follows them unraveling some mysteries and histories around the town and the ghost who seems to live in the building. And that aspect I thought was really well done. I really enjoyed a lot because there's a lot more substance than I feel that the blurb on the book or the cover kind of leads you to believe. Because Alex is Mexican American, it spends a lot of time unpacking the history of Mexican Americans and their contribution to American society and history. There's so much in here, and I found it just fascinating and incredibly well done. I loved it so much. And the author's note is incredible. She discusses this a bit more about how this image of a very white pastoral America is actually wildly incorrect and frankly very racist. This book kind of fell short for me in the romance department. There's a good amount of spice considering in this, and I don't know what it was about it. I just found it very cringe. Like usually I kind of fine with that and I don't really care. I'll read it, whatever. This I just found very, very cringe. I struggled a little bit with Alex and Jeremiah because Alex, she has like baggage and she has stuff that she works on throughout the book. But when they first meet, like she's quite mean, and like not just mean to him, she's like mean to everybody because she's got some problems and she's not that happy about having to come back home. And Jeremiah is like the most golden retriever of golden retriever love interests I've ever read in my life, and I feel like it would have been better if he had a little bit of teeth, because otherwise it was like just her coming at him and being really mean and him just kind of taking it or like really passively disengaging, and it just didn't work super well for me. I would have loved it if he had a little bit more to work on. I mean, I think I keep saying this every time I read a romance lately, that I would just love where the male love interest isn't perfect female ideal out of the gate. I would love for him to have to do a bit of like emotional work and like fight the patriarchy inside of him, not just to be this like incredibly hunky sexy man that has a PhD in feminism. I think romance is romantic to me when it feels like it's been earned by both of the characters on the page. That's what I like personally. But he did have a PhD in history and dresses like he's from like the 1920s with like a long jacket and like a little cap and like proper little shirt with buttons and a collar and stuff going on. So if you like that very golden retriever, like 1920s gentlemanly, I don't, you know what I mean? Maybe you would like this book. The last book that I want to talk about to you today is Sower. This is a sci-fi thriller and another one that is a bit shorter. I'm not going to tell you tons about the plot because a lot of it's fun when you just discover it as you go. In this book, we're following Hen and Junior. They are living in kind of a dystopian, near-ish future. One day, a stranger comes to the door and tells Junior that he has been nominated as part of this like lottery he didn't sign up for and didn't necessarily want, to go to space. Hen won't be staying alone. This is a very weird book. You do not go to space in this book, you stay. This is about how it affects Hen and Junior's relationship. Quite claustrophobic. It's a slower build. I think this would appeal to people who are fans of Blake Crouch's writing style. Like, it's very quick. You get straight into the plot. There's a lot of mystery, a little bit less character development, a lot of action and tension. All of the characters have like a bit of a weird feeling. Like, everybody just feels a bit off. I didn't quite predict the twist at the end, which was a nice surprise. I had a really good time reading it. There were a few things maybe that felt a little underdeveloped or underexplained. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really say a whole lot about it without totally spoiling it. So that's Sower. So I feel like I have been talking forever. That's all the books that I have to talk about to you today. Some very strange ones, some very good ones, and a lot of kind of middle of the road. I think that was 12, and yeah, Thanks so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts if you've read any of these books or if you want to read any of these books. Let me know in the comments, and until then, I'll see you next week. Bye!